The eclipse came and went yesterday, but the new moon started something much bigger overnight, and almost nobody is talking about what that combination actually does. When a total solar eclipse and a brand new moon fall back-to-back like this, the energetic signature isn't subtle. It's a complete reset. It's the universe rebooting something inside you that has been running on outdated code for years. If you woke up today feeling strange, off rhythm, unusually emotional, or strangely clear, what you're experiencing isn't random. It's a response. I'm about to share 7 strange signs that this eclipse and new moon have genuinely changed your energy, body, dreams, and choices. And the 7th sign is the one almost everyone misses. Yesterday, a total solar eclipse moved across the sky, and overnight, a brand new moon followed directly behind it, sealing the doorway the eclipse opened. This pairing is not ordinary. Eclipses on their own already carry compressed acceleration, but when a new moon arrives within hours, the cosmic signal essentially doubles, an entity-level reboot, rather than a single reset. Astrologers have tracked this exact convergence for years, and the energetic signature is now moving through bodies, dreams, relationships, and habits in ways that are difficult to dismiss even for the most skeptical observer. Stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through may explain what your nervous system has been quietly trying to tell you since you woke. Today is the morning after. The countdown is over. The path of totality has already crossed the sky, and millions of people around the world either stood beneath it or carried quiet awareness of what was unfolding above them. Yesterday was the threshold. Today is the residue, the part almost every spiritual teacher skips over, but the part that actually shapes what your life will feel like for the next 18 months. If today feels recognizable but slightly off rhythm, what you're noticing isn't fatigue, isn't coincidence, isn't ordinary Tuesday energy. It is the felt signature of a rare celestial reset point, and the 7 signs I'm about to share are the clearest evidence that it has genuinely worked on something real inside you. Before we get to the 7 signs themselves, there's an important pattern worth naming clearly. Enormous attention gets poured into the eclipse itself. The countdown, the path of totality, the warnings, the visuals, the emotional accounts uploaded in real time. Far less attention gets paid to the day after, when daily life quietly resumes and the initial intensity has faded. This gap matters because the days following eclipses are often where the lasting influence actually reveals itself. Eclipse energy is widely understood as compressing what might normally unfold across many months into a much shorter window, and that compression rarely stops the moment totality ends. It continues rippling outward for hours, days, and weeks, often becoming more recognizable today than it was yesterday, while you were still inside the most intense hours. There is a useful parallel here to how the human mind processes significant experiences in general. Psychologists studying memory and emotional integration have long noted that the full meaning of a major event often crystallizes not during the event itself, but in the hours and days that follow, when the mind finally has space to sort, organize, and make sense of what occurred. Whether or not you attach any spiritual framework to yesterday's threshold, this basic pattern applies regardless. Meaning emerges most clearly in the aftermath, rather than in the moment, and the morning you're experiencing right now is part of that emergence window. This is also why so many eclipse accounts online feel rushed and incomplete. They were written from inside the event, before the integration had a chance to fully land. Before we walk through the 7 signs together, it's worth acknowledging honestly that yesterday may not have unfolded exactly as you anticipated. Some of you felt exactly what countless eclipse accounts describe: heightened emotion, vivid dreams, an unmistakable sense of significant energy moving through the day. Others experienced something far quieter, an eclipse that came and went with little internal disturbance, leaving you wondering this morning whether anything actually happened at all. Both experiences are entirely valid. Eclipses don't move through every person identically. Your nervous system, your current life circumstances, your openness or resistance in this particular season, all of these shape how yesterday's threshold specifically landed for you, regardless of how loudly it moved through the people sitting around you. If today feels underwhelming compared to what you expected, resist the urge to interpret that underwhelm as failure. Eclipse energy frequently reveals its full significance gradually, sometimes over days, sometimes over the following weeks, as patterns slowly become visible that weren't apparent in the immediate aftermath. We often expect transformation to announce itself clearly, a single dramatic moment we can point to afterward as the turning point. But genuine lasting change more frequently resembles a slow accumulation of small shifts, each one modest on its own, yet adding up to something considerably more significant than any individual moment within the process would suggest. Today may simply be one quiet step within that longer ongoing accumulation, its full meaning only becoming clear considerably later, once enough of the smaller pieces have finally gathered together. There is another angle worth naming directly. The pairing of yesterday's solar eclipse with last night's new moon matters beyond the eclipse alone. A new moon on its own already represents a fresh cycle, a planting point, a doorway for intention. But a new moon arriving within hours of a total solar eclipse does something different. It locks the reset. It takes whatever the eclipse cracked open and seals it into the underlying operating system of your life, making the shift considerably harder to undo than a typical eclipse window. This is one reason so many people are reporting strange feelings today that don't match ordinary post-eclipse patterns. They are feeling both events at once. The body rarely knows the difference between one threshold and 2 layered thresholds arriving in the same 24 hours. Just one more piece of context before the signs begin. Throughout this reflection, I'm going to maintain a particular rhythm for a reason that becomes clear by the end. Each of the 7 signs will be introduced, expanded, and then handed off to the next one with a small forward tease. That structure isn't accidental. It's designed to match how the mind actually retains new information under high emotional load, the same pattern that keeps people watching long-form content all the way through. If your attention drifts at any point, the very next sentence will reset it. The 7th sign will then open into an integration window that is worth taking in fully. With that foundation in place, let's begin. The first sign many people notice the morning after a combined eclipse and new moon event involves a subtle but distinct distortion in how time itself feels. Yesterday's hours may have stretched strangely, some periods feeling unusually long, others compressing into what felt like single moments. Today, that distortion often continues in a gentler form, a quiet sense that this morning, this afternoon, this particular block of hours feels unlike the same block would normally feel in any ordinary week. You may notice that minutes pass as though they're made of different material than the minutes you're used to. You may notice that conversations seem slightly longer, slightly slower, slightly more weighted than you're accustomed to. You may find yourself glancing at clocks and feeling surprised that so little time has actually passed, or surprised that hours have disappeared without your noticing. This isn't imagination alone, even though ordinary tiredness is also in the mix. Many traditions describe eclipse windows as temporarily altering our usual relationship with linear time, and that altered perception frequently lingers into the day after before gradually returning to its familiar rhythm. The new moon, layered behind the eclipse, stretches this effect longer than a typical eclipse window would, which is why ordinary time may still feel out of joint even now, well past the astronomical event itself. As we move from this shifted sense of time into the next layer, keep watching, because the next sign is the one most people say hit them hardest. The second sign, many people report the morning after an eclipse plus new moon window, involves relationships, specifically waking up today with unexpected clarity about a connection that felt confusing or unresolved just yesterday. This might be a romantic partnership, a long friendship, a sibling relationship, a parent dynamic, or even a working relationship that has been quietly weighing on you for months. The clarity rarely arrives as a complete overnight resolution. More often, it shows up as a shift in how you're seeing the entire situation. Less fog, less confusion, a clearer sense of what you actually want or need from this particular connection, even if you haven't yet acted on that clarity. Eclipses have long been associated with illuminating exactly this kind of relational truth, cutting through patterns of avoidance or denial that may have persisted far longer than you wanted them to. Combined with the new moon, that illumination lands harder, because the new moon quietly insists that what the eclipse revealed cannot be unlearned. You may also notice today that an old friendship feels quietly over, that a familiar relationship now asks something of you it didn't ask before, that someone you hadn't thought about in months suddenly appears in your awareness for no obvious reason. This particular sign can feel genuinely uncomfortable, especially when the clarity that emerges points toward a truth you'd prefer not to face, that a relationship has quietly run its course, that a long overdue boundary needs to be set, that a conversation you've been postponing for months can no longer reasonably be delayed. The discomfort doesn't diminish the sign's validity. If anything, the discomfort often confirms that the clarity is genuine rather than wishful, because authentic insight frequently asks something difficult of us precisely because it's cutting through comfortable avoidance. If you've woken up today with unexpected clarity about a relationship, whether that clarity feels peaceful or painful, consider this a meaningful confirmation that yesterday's threshold worked on something real inside you. Give yourself time before acting, but trust that its arrival is not coincidental. Stay with me, because the third sign is the one nobody saw coming. The third sign involves the body directly, physical sensations today that don't trace back to any obvious cause, yet feel connected to something considerably larger than ordinary tiredness or routine stress. This might appear as unusual heaviness in the limbs that sleep doesn't fully explain. It might appear as an unexpected surge of energy with an almost electric quality. It might appear as a specific sensation around the chest, throat, or stomach that feels emotionally significant even without an obvious trigger attached. Some people notice changes in appetite, in sleep quality from last night, in general physical sensitivity to temperature, light, or sound. Others notice a sudden aversion to certain foods, an unexpected craving for stillness, or a strange sense that their body wants to move more slowly than their mind wants to keep up. None of this should be mistaken for medical explanation, and any genuinely concerning physical symptom deserves real medical attention rather than purely spiritual interpretation. But many traditions describe the body as processing significant energetic shifts before the conscious mind fully catches up. Physical sensations today may simply be your system's way of integrating what moved through it yesterday and overnight, and giving those sensations real attention is often more accurate than treating them as background noise. If you're noticing any of these physical signals today, simple self-care tends to support the body's natural integration considerably more than pushing through at your usual pace. Extra rest, gentler movement, rather than intense exertion, adequate hydration, and quiet time away from excessive stimulation give the body the space it may genuinely need right now. There is no requirement to power through today as if nothing unusual has happened. Honoring what your body is quietly asking for is itself a meaningful way of respecting whatever process yesterday's threshold set into motion. Watch for the next sign carefully, because the fourth sign is the one people describe as the emotional pivot of the entire sequence. The fourth sign involves a specific kind of internal resistance emerging today, a habit, belief, or behavioral pattern that you've maintained for a long time, suddenly feeling genuinely impossible to continue. Not through willpower, not through discipline, but through a felt sense that the old pattern simply no longer fits who you actually are. This differs meaningfully from ordinary motivation or resolution, which often fades within days. The eclipse plus new moon version of this sign carries a different quality altogether. Less like deciding to change, and more like discovering that something has already changed, leaving the old pattern feeling foreign rather than simply undesirable. You might notice this around a habit you've struggled with for years, a self-belief you've quietly carried since childhood, or a way of relating to others that suddenly feels wasteful to maintain. You might notice it in how you respond to criticism, in how you spend Sunday mornings, in how you make small decisions that used to carry enormous internal resistance. Eclipses are frequently described as catalysts for exactly this kind of pattern release, and the new moon, layered directly behind one, amplifies that release in ways that can feel startling. The release isn't effortful, it's almost involuntary. Something that used to require sustained determination now simply doesn't want to live inside you anymore. If something like this has surfaced for you today, trust it, even if the practical work of actually letting go of the old pattern still feels unfinished. It's worth naming that this particular sign, however positive its ultimate direction, often arrives alongside an unexpected wave of grief, a sense of loss for the identity or role that pattern once served, even as you recognize clearly that it no longer fits. That grief doesn't contradict the sign's positive nature. It simply reflects the genuine complexity of real change, which almost always involves both relief at releasing what no longer serves and genuine mourning for the version of yourself that pattern once represented. Both feelings can coexist without canceling each other out, and honoring both is part of honoring the change itself. The fifth sign builds directly on this one, and it's the one most people mistake for nothing. The fifth sign involves an uptick in meaningful coincidence, numbers repeating with unusual frequency, a sentence landing on something you'd been quietly considering, a stranger mentioning the exact word you needed to hear, a piece of information crossing your path at the exact moment you needed to understand it. Many traditions describe the days following an eclipse as particularly rich with this kind of synchronistic arrangement, as though the accelerated energy of the eclipse continues rippling outward, organizing circumstances with unusual precision in its immediate aftermath. The new moon, layered into the sequence, makes this synchronistic window even more concentrated than usual, and the moment between the eclipse and the new moon has long been considered a particularly thin threshold for exactly this kind of trans-temporal messaging. This isn't about forcing significance onto every ordinary coincidence today, however. It's about staying genuinely open to noticing when something does feel meaningfully timed, rather than reflexively dismissing it. The human mind is naturally inclined toward pattern recognition, sometimes finding connection where none genuinely exists simply because it's primed to look. That tendency is worth acknowledging honestly, especially in a culture saturated with content about angel numbers and meaningful signs. The synchronistic moments that count as genuine tend to arrive unbidden, striking you with their timing before you've consciously gone looking for confirmation of anything. They tend to feel slightly uncanny rather than neatly supportive, and they tend to arrive in clusters rather than as single, tidy points of confirmation. If today has brought several of these small but precisely timed moments, consider this meaningful confirmation that yesterday's threshold continues actively working through your circumstances even now, well beyond the astronomical window itself. Pay close attention as we move into the sixth sign, because it is the quietest of the seven and the one most easily missed. The sixth sign involves a subtle but significant shift in your relationship to control, specifically noticing today that you feel less gripped by needing a particular situation to unfold exactly as you previously insisted it must. This isn't resignation. It isn't giving up. It's something closer to genuine release, a loosening of the tight grip that anxiety or fear often keeps on our expectations. This might show up around a specific outcome you've been anxiously awaiting, a decision you've been agonizing over, or a situation entirely outside your control that you've nonetheless been mentally wrestling with for weeks. Today, that internal grip may feel notably looser, replaced by something closer to trust, or at least a willingness to let the situation unfold without your constant mental intervention. You may notice that you checked your email less anxiously than usual, that you approached a recurring worry with unexpected calm, that you let someone else handle something you would normally have tried to control. Many traditions describe eclipses as offering exactly this kind of release, dissolving rigid attachment to specific outcomes in favor of a more open, trusting relationship with whatever unfolds next. Layered with the new moon, the release becomes less like a brief exhale and more like a sustained loosening, a permanent downgrade in the volume of internal pressure you've been carrying. If you've noticed this softening today, it represents real meaningful movement, even though it may feel more like an absence of tension than a dramatic presence of anything new. The relaxation in your shoulders and jaw that you didn't consciously initiate, the deeper, easier quality of your breathing compared to how it's felt in recent weeks, those are physical markers of this particular shift. And the body often registers released attachment before the conscious mind fully catches up to what's changed. The final sign is the one almost everyone recognizes in hindsight, and it's the one that quietly changes how you move forward. The seventh and final sign is perhaps the most subtle of all, and yet many people describe it as the clearest confirmation that yesterday's threshold genuinely worked. It's a quiet, grounded sense of readiness. Not excitement exactly, not certainty about specific next steps, but a settled feeling that you are prepared for whatever comes next, even without knowing precisely what that will be. This sign often arrives without obvious cause, simply a felt sense of steadiness that wasn't quite present a few days ago. You might notice it as reduced anxiety about the future, a willingness to take action you'd previously hesitated over, or simply a general sense of internal solidity that feels different from your baseline before the entire eclipse sequence began. You might notice that a question you couldn't answer yesterday answers itself today without effort, or that a plan you've been postponing suddenly feels obvious and natural, or that you move through the day with less internal negotiation than usual. This particular sign matters because it points toward genuine integration rather than temporary emotional intensity. Excitement fades, dramatic emotion settles, but a grounded sense of readiness, once genuinely present, tends to persist, continuing to support you through whatever the coming weeks and months of this new cycle actually bring. It is the rarest of the seven because it cannot be performed, cannot be improvised, and cannot be confused with wishful thinking the way the others can sometimes be. It's worth distinguishing this genuine readiness from complacency or simple emotional numbness, which can sometimes masquerade as calm acceptance without actually representing meaningful internal movement. Genuine readiness carries a certain warmth alongside its steadiness, an underlying sense of engagement with life rather than detachment from it. If today's calm feels more like disconnection or emotional flatness than grounded engagement, that distinction is worth noting honestly. The two states, while superficially similar, point toward very different underlying processes. If what you're feeling is the warmer version, the readiness that carries subtle vitality underneath it, you're in exactly the right place. This requires one more step to actually take root in your life, and the next section explains what that step looks like. Now that all 7 signs have been named, integration begins. Looking back across the 7 signs, the shifted sense of time, the sudden relational clarity, the unexplained physical sensations, the old pattern that suddenly feels impossible to continue, the genuinely timed coincidences, the loosened grip on outcomes, the quiet, grounded sense of readiness, a single thread connects all of them. None of these signs require dramatic external proof. Each one reveals itself through subtle internal shifts, the kind that rarely make for an impressive story, but represent genuine, functional change in how you're actually moving through your life. This matters because it shifts the measure of yesterday's threshold away from how dramatic the day itself felt and toward how it's actually functioning in your life today and in the days ahead. An eclipse plus new moon window that produced relational clarity, physical integration, pattern release, meaningful synchronicity, released attachment, and grounded readiness, even without any single dramatic emotional peak, has worked considerably more powerfully than one that felt intensely emotional in the moment, but left no lasting trace in how you actually live afterward. This same principle applies to every meaningful threshold you walk through, not simply yesterday's eclipse alone. What ultimately matters far less is how dramatic any individual moment felt, and far more how each one quietly continues functioning within the ordinary texture of your daily choices moving forward from here. If today passes and none of the 7 signs feel clearly present in your experience, that doesn't necessarily mean yesterday's threshold failed to work for you, and it certainly doesn't mean something is wrong with your process. Integration often unfolds gradually. Some people notice these signs within hours of an eclipse. Others notice them days or even weeks later, sometimes only recognizing in hindsight that a particular shift traces directly back to yesterday's threshold. If today feels ordinary, without any of these 7 signs clearly present, consider staying gently attentive over the coming days, rather than concluding definitively that nothing shifted. Think back to genuinely significant turning points from your own past, decisions, relationships, realizations that reshaped something important. And notice how many of those moments were fully recognized as significant only in hindsight, sometimes months or years later, rather than obvious the day they actually occurred. This same pattern remains entirely plausible for yesterday's threshold. Its full significance may simply not be fully visible yet, regardless of how today specifically feels. Consider keeping a simple note today of whichever signs felt most present for you, whether in a journal or simply in a private mental list. Return to this note periodically over the coming weeks and months, particularly around future thresholds along the same celestial cycle, to notice how these initial seeds have continued growing across this extended arc. Marking those future dates specifically, rather than waiting for the entire cycle to conclude before reflecting, tends to reveal considerably more about how genuine energetic cycles actually unfold inside a specific life, compared to attempting to understand the whole story only after everything has already concluded. Throughout this entire reflection, one central theme has surfaced repeatedly and is worth restating clearly one final time. Genuine energetic movement rarely announces itself as dramatically as popular spiritual content often suggests it should. The 7 signs we explored today all tend to reveal themselves quietly, sometimes so quietly that recognizing them requires deliberate, gentle attention, rather than passive waiting for something obvious to happen. Much of contemporary spiritual culture, shaped heavily by social media's preference for dramatic, easily shareable moments, has inadvertently created an expectation that genuine energetic experience must look a particular way to count as real, visible emotion, obvious synchronicity, a clear before and after transformation narrative. This expectation, however unintentional, does a genuine disservice to the vast majority of organic energetic experience, which tends to unfold considerably more quietly than what typically gets shared publicly. Recognizing this cultural pattern and consciously choosing not to measure your own experience against it is itself a meaningful act of discernment, worth carrying forward well beyond today's specific reflection. If yesterday felt profound, and today confirms that with obvious signs, honor that fully. If yesterday felt quiet, and today feels similarly ordinary, honor that equally, trusting that undramatic experience carries just as much legitimate value as anything more visibly intense. If you're genuinely uncertain today, still unsure what, if anything, shifted, that uncertainty itself remains valid too, simply part of a process that often reveals its full significance only with continued time and attention. Before the channel section at the end, there's one final piece worth offering directly. You have permission today to release any pressure you might be carrying around, whether yesterday's threshold worked in some measurable, dramatic way. Energetic growth was never meant to function as a performance, requiring visible proof to others or even to yourself. Whatever your honest experience has been across this sequence, trust that you've engaged with genuine sincerity. That sincerity, more than any particular dramatic outcome, is ultimately what every meaningful tradition has always asked of those who choose to meet significant thresholds consciously. As today draws toward its close, take a moment to appreciate the full arc this rare celestial window has offered. The eclipse opened what could not have been opened alone. The new moon sealed what the eclipse cracked open. Together, they formed a complete reset, the kind that quietly restructures the next 18 months from the inside out, rather than announcing itself with fireworks. Whatever you've noticed today, and whichever of these 7 signs feel present in your experience, represents the opening notes of a considerably longer story, rather than a single, complete narrative concluding in these first 24 hours. The story has only just begun, and the 7 signs you may already be recognizing are simply the first clear evidence that it has genuinely begun inside you. If this entire eclipse journey has meant something to you, I'd love to hear from you directly. Tell me in the comments which of the 7 signs you've noticed today, or whether you're still watching and waiting to see what unfolds in the days ahead. Your reflections throughout this journey have created something genuinely meaningful, a space where thousands of people have moved through this entire remarkable sequence together, from anticipation through arrival through this quiet, honest morning after. If this video and this entire reflection resonated with you, please like, subscribe for whatever cosmic thresholds this remarkable year continues to offer, and share it with someone who might need permission today to trust their own quiet process rather than measuring themselves against anyone else's louder story. Whatever genuinely shifted in you through this rare celestial window, trust that it continues unfolding exactly as it needs to in its own time. The 7 signs are not the end of the story. They are simply the first clear evidence that the story has genuinely begun.